The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint barking of stray dogs and the distant hum of traffic. The slums on the edge of the city were cloaked in shadows, their narrow alleys filled with the smell of smoke, sweat, and damp earth. Amid these alleys lived Amara Okafor, a young woman in her early 20s. Life had never been kind to her. Her father had died when she was little. Her mother sold vegetables at the roadside until sickness took her, and Amara was left to fight the world alone. She worked long hours at a rundown market stall, cleaning fish and carrying crates for pennies. Even then, most nights she went to bed hungry, her stomach curling in pain, her thin mattress scratching her skin through the cloth. She had grown used to hardship, but deep inside, she carried a silent prayer that somehow her life would change, that destiny would finally notice her. That night, as she trudged home from the market, clutching a torn bag with a single loaf of bread inside, she heard something faint in the wind. At first, she thought it was a cat or a restless dog. But as she neared the pile of overflowing trash bins at the corner of the street, the sound grew clearer. It was not a cat. It was a cry. Amara froze. Her tired feet hesitated as her heart pounded. Slowly, she stepped closer, the stench of rotten food and damp paper filling her nose. She pushed aside a broken crate, and there inside a dirty cardboard box lay a baby. Her breath caught. The infant's face was red from crying, his tiny fists waving desperately in the air. He was wrapped in nothing but a torn piece of cloth, stained and damp. Rats scattered as Amara knelt down, her hands trembling. "Jesus," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Who could do this?" Her eyes filled with tears. The baby's cries pierced her heart, echoing through the quiet alley like a plea to the heavens. Without thinking twice, she scooped him into her arms. His skin was cold, his breathing shallow, and his whimpers softer now, as if exhaustion was pulling him under. Amara hugged him close to her chest, trying to give him warmth. She looked around desperately, but the street was empty. Whoever had abandoned this child was long gone. She thought of taking him to the police station, but then the harsh truth struck her. Orphans in the city often disappeared, ending up in cruel hands, sold or left to starve. "No," she whispered firmly, her tears sliding down her cheeks. "Not you. You won't die here." Her torn slippers slapped against the ground as she hurried back to her shack, clutching the baby as though he were treasure. When she reached the tiny tin roof hut she called home, she laid him on her bed. She lit the small kerosene lamp and studied his fragile body. He was barely a few weeks old, his face innocent, his tiny chest rising and falling unevenly. Amara broke the loaf of bread she had bought, her own stomach crying in protest. She dipped it in water and swallowed quickly, then tore an old scarf into strips and wrapped the baby tightly to keep him warm. She gave him water mixed with a drop of milk she had begged from a neighbor earlier. The baby calmed, his eyes fluttering open for a moment, staring at her as though recognizing her face. Amara froze, her breath hitching. Something stirred deep inside her chest, a feeling she had never known. A connection. A bond. She pressed her hand over her heart and whispered, "I don't know who left you, but I know God led me here tonight." The night stretched on, but Amara stayed awake, rocking the baby in her arms, humming softly despite her exhaustion. She didn't know how she would feed him tomorrow, or how she would explain to anyone why she suddenly had a child. But one thing was clear, this baby was now her responsibility. And in that fragile heartbeat of decision, her destiny shifted. Unseen by her, far across the city in a towering glass mansion, the life of a wealthy billionaire named Alexander Okoro was unfolding in comfort and grandeur. He lived a life of wealth Amara could never imagine, but fate was already weaving their paths together through this abandoned child, through choices yet to be made, through love and betrayal waiting just beyond the horizon. For now, Amara only held the baby tighter, whispering to him as dawn crept slowly across the horizon. "You are mine now, and I will never leave you." The first rays of dawn spilled across the slums, painting the rusted tin roofs in shades of gold. Amara had barely slept. Her eyes were heavy, but her arms still cradled the tiny baby, who now slept soundly against her chest. Every so often she would touch his small hand to make sure he was still breathing. Fear and hope danced in her heart in equal measure. When the baby stirred and whimpered, Amara panicked. She had nothing, no milk, no clothes, no blankets, fit for a child. She hurried outside, wrapping him carefully in a shawl, and made her way to the neighbor's house. Mama Chica, a stout woman in her 50s who sold bean cakes by the roadside, looked up in surprise as Amara appeared at her door. "Amara, what is this?" Mama Chica gasped, seeing the baby. Amara's lips trembled. "I found him in the trash. Someone left him there." The older woman shook her head, clicking her tongue. "This world is wicked. But child, how will you take care of him? You don't even have enough for yourself." "I don't know," Amara admitted, her eyes glistening, "but I can't leave him. Please, Mama, do you have a little milk?" Mama Chica sighed, but her motherly heart softened. She poured some warm goat milk into a small bottle and handed it over. Amara fed the baby carefully, watching his tiny mouth latch onto the nipple, his small body relaxing as he drank. Tears slid down her cheeks again, tears of relief, of fear, of something she couldn't explain. When she returned to her hut, she sat on the floor and held him close. She whispered, "From today, your name will be Chima. It means God knows, because only God knows why you came into my life and what your future will be." Chima. The name felt right, as though the heavens themselves had whispered it into her heart. Days turned into weeks, and Amara's life changed in ways she had never imagined. She rose earlier than before, worked harder at the market, and saved every spare coin to buy powdered milk for Chima. She washed his tiny clothes in a basin, sang him to sleep, and shielded him from the cold with her own body when the nights grew too harsh. People in the slum gossiped, of course. "Did you hear? Amara has a child now. No man, no husband, just a baby." Maybe she is lying. Maybe it is her own shameful secret. Amara ignored their words. She didn't care. Every time she looked into Chima's innocent eyes, she felt strength she never knew she had. She had found a purpose, a reason to fight harder. But destiny had bigger plans. Far away in the heart of the city, life moved to a different rhythm. Skyscrapers touched the clouds, cars glided over wide roads, and luxury spilled from every corner. At the top of this world stood Alexander Okoro, one of the wealthiest men in the country. Tall, commanding, and sharp-eyed, he was a man who had built an empire from his father's legacy. His mansion was filled with marble floors, chandeliers, and servants moving quietly to meet every command. Yet, beneath the grandeur, his life was not as perfect as it seemed. His wife, Victoria, was elegant and beautiful, but her heart was cold. Their marriage, once built on love, had turned into a battlefield of power and appearances. Victoria longed for social status and control, while Alexander longed for peace. Their greatest wound was one they never spoke about openly: their inability to have children. For years, doctors had whispered truths and offered treatments, but hope had slowly died. Their home, though filled with riches, was empty of the sound of a child's laughter. And so, Alexander buried himself in work, while Victoria buried herself in parties and appearances. But fate was stirring. Back in the slum, Amara's life was a storm of sacrifice. Feeding Chima meant eating less for herself. Buying milk meant working extra hours until her fingers bled. Still, she never complained. At night, she would rock him and whisper stories of a better tomorrow. One evening, as the rains poured heavily, Amara wrapped Chima tightly and rushed to cover leaks in her roof. Suddenly, Chima began to cough violently. Fear gripped her heart. His small chest wheezed, his cries grew weaker, and panic rose in her throat. "No, no, please God, not him," she cried. She ran barefoot through the rain, clutching him as she headed to the small, overcrowded clinic nearby. The doctor, overworked and tired, frowned as he examined the baby. "He has an infection. He is weak. Without proper medicine, he may not survive," the doctor said. Amara's world spun. She had no money for the medicine he prescribed. She pleaded, begged, even offered to work for the clinic. But rules were rules. That night, she sat outside the clinic, holding Chima as he whimpered softly. The rain had stopped, but her tears had not. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered, "I will not lose you. I swear, I will do anything. Even if I have to beg in the streets, I will save you." Unseen by her, a black luxury car slowed as it passed the clinic. Behind the tinted glass sat Alexander Okoro, returning from a late business meeting. His eyes caught a glimpse of the young woman clutching a child, her face streaked with tears, her arms wrapped protectively around him. Something stirred in his heart. He could not explain it, but he could not look away. Fate had begun to weave their lives together. The night air was heavy with the scent of wet soil. As Amara sat huddled outside the clinic, Chima pressed tightly to her chest. The baby's tiny breaths rattled weakly, his cries reduced to soft whimpers that tore through her soul. She was exhausted, drenched, and trembling with fear. Her mind raced in circles. She had nothing left to sell, nothing left to pawn. The medicine Chima needed cost more than she could earn in weeks. Helplessness gnawed at her like a beast. For the first time since she found Chima, she felt powerless to protect him. Then, headlights cut through the darkness. A sleek black car slowed near the clinic. The tinted windows slid down halfway, and Amara found herself staring into a pair of sharp, curious eyes. The man inside was unlike anyone she had ever seen in her world, dressed in a tailored suit, his aura of wealth and authority undeniable. "Are you all right?" His deep voice carried through the rain-washed air. Amara swallowed hard, clutching Chima tighter. She was used to people ignoring her, pretending she didn't exist. Yet this stranger, this man who clearly belonged to another world, had stopped. My baby is sick," she stammered. "The doctor says he needs medicine. I don't have the money." The man's gaze softened slightly as he leaned forward. For a moment, Amara thought she saw something flicker in his expression: pain, recognition, perhaps even longing. "What's wrong with him?" the man asked. "An infection. The doctor says he's too weak to fight it without medicine." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Please, sir, I cannot lose him." The man hesitated. Normally, Alexander Okoro did not involve himself in the troubles of strangers. He was used to people begging him for favors, for money, for chances. But something about this woman struck him differently. There was no selfishness in her plea, only raw desperation for the fragile child in her arms. He opened his wallet and handed her a thick stack of bills. "Take this, get what he needs." Amara's eyes widened. She shook her head frantically, pushing the money back toward him. "No, sir, I can't take so much. Just enough for the medicine, please." Alexander studied her with surprise. Most would have snatched the money without hesitation. But this woman, poor as she clearly was, refused to take more than what she needed. "Take it," he said firmly. "Consider it a gift." Amara's hands trembled as she accepted it. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "God bless you, sir. I don't know who you are, but may heaven reward you." Alexander nodded, his chest tightening in a way he couldn't explain. "Take care of the child." The window rolled up and the car pulled away, leaving Amara staring after it, her heart pounding with gratitude and confusion. She whispered to Chima, "You see, my son? God sent us an angel tonight." The next morning, with the medicine bought and carefully given, Chima's fever began to subside. His small breaths grew steadier, his color returned, and he even managed a weak smile. Amara held him and wept, her heart bursting with relief. For days, she thought about the stranger in the car. Who was he? Why had he helped her when so many others had looked away? She would likely never see him again, but his kindness had left a mark on her soul. Meanwhile, in the towering mansion across the city, Alexander could not shake the memory of the woman and child from his mind. He sat at his mahogany desk, staring at reports, but seeing only her tear-streaked face, the way she had clutched the baby as though her life depended on it. His wife, Victoria, noticed his distraction during dinner. "What's troubling you?" she asked sharply, her jeweled hand tapping against her glass. "Nothing," Alexander replied curtly. "Nothing? You've been lost in thought for days." Her eyes narrowed. "Is it another woman?" He shot her a cold look. "Not everything is about you, Victoria." Her lips pursed, but she didn't push further. Alexander rarely let anyone into his thoughts, and tonight was no different. Still, as he lay in his vast, empty bed later, he couldn't stop replaying the scene. The woman's refusal to take more money than she needed had struck him deeply. In his world, people clawed for wealth and power, but she had only wanted enough to save her child. It stirred something in him, something long buried beneath layers of ambition and disappointment. Weeks passed, and Amara's struggles continued. Feeding Chima, working at the market, fending off gossip, her life was a daily battle. But every time Chima smiled, every time his little hand curled around her finger, she found the strength to keep going. One afternoon, as she carried a basket of fish through the bustling market, a luxury car rolled slowly down the road. She didn't notice at first she was too busy bargaining with a stubborn customer. But when the car stopped and the window lowered, her breath caught. It was him, the stranger, Alexander Okoro. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the noise of the market faded. He stepped out of the car, his presence commanding immediate attention. People whispered, bowing their heads, recognizing the famous billionaire. Amara's heart raced as he approached. "You," Alexander said softly, almost in disbelief. "We meet again." Amara's knees felt weak, but she managed a small nod. "Yes, sir, and I never got to thank you properly for saving my son's life." Alexander's gaze shifted to Chima, who was tied securely to Amara's back with a cloth wrap. The child giggled, reaching out a tiny hand as though drawn to him. Something inside Alexander's chest cracked open. Perhaps fate was not done with them yet. The marketplace buzzed with its usual chaos vendors shouting prices, children darting between stalls, and the sharp scent of dried fish mixing with roasted maize in the air. But for Amara, everything blurred the moment Alexander Okoro stood before her. His presence was like a storm commanding, impossible to ignore. Chima giggled on her back, waving his small hands toward Alexander. The billionaire's lips curved ever so slightly, a rare softness breaking through his usually stoic expression. He extended a finger, and the baby grabbed it instantly, cooing in delight. Amara's heart swelled. For weeks she had survived on scraps of hope, yet here was this powerful man standing in the middle of her world, acknowledging her and her child as though they mattered. She cleared her throat nervously. "Sir, I never knew who you were the other night," she said quietly, "but I prayed for you. If not for your help, Chima would not be here." Alexander's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You didn't need to pray for me. I did nothing extraordinary." "To me, it was everything," Amara whispered. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Two souls from different worlds connected by a child's innocent grasp. Finally, Alexander straightened, slipping his hand back into his pocket. "What is your name?" he asked. "Amara Okafor." He nodded. "Take care of him, Amara. That boy, he has a light about him." Before she could reply, one of his aides rushed forward, murmuring about an urgent meeting. Alexander gave a final glance at the baby, then turned and walked back to his car. The market seemed to exhale as the billionaire drove away, leaving Amara clutching her basket with trembling hands. That evening, Amara couldn't shake the encounter from her mind. Why had Chima reached for him so eagerly, as though he knew Alexander already? And why did Alexander's eyes soften every time he looked at the baby? She shook her head. It was foolishness. Men like him belonged to another world, a world where women like her were invisible. She reminded herself that her only focus was Chima feeding him, keeping him safe, and giving him a chance at a better life. Yet, deep inside, a seed had been planted. Meanwhile, in the Okoro mansion, the air was tense. Victoria stood by the window of their lavish bedroom, sipping a glass of wine. "You've been distracted again," she said, her voice laced with suspicion. "Your mind is elsewhere." Alexander removed his cufflinks, his jaw tightening. "Business has been demanding." Victoria smirked, her sharp eyes studying him. "Business? Or another woman?" He shot her a look of warning. "Don't start." She laughed bitterly. "You think I don't notice? You've been restless ever since that night you came home late. You've changed, Alexander, and I will find out why." Her words lingered in the room long after she left. Alexander poured himself a drink, his mind drifting not to his wife, but to Amara's tearful gratitude, the baby's tiny hand gripping his finger, the purity in their bond. He told himself it was just curiosity, nothing more. But even he knew that was a lie. Weeks passed, and fate refused to let their worlds drift apart. One afternoon, as Amara carried a heavy basket of yams across the market, a car honked. She turned, startled, to see Alexander's sleek vehicle once again. This time, He stepped out without hesitation, his gaze scanning the crowd until it landed on her. "Amara," he greeted, his voice firm yet gentle. She bowed her head instinctively. "Good afternoon, sir." "You shouldn't be carrying that alone." Without waiting for her protest, he motioned to his driver, who lifted the basket with ease. "I can manage," Amara murmured, embarrassed by the attention. "I know you can," Alexander replied evenly, "but that doesn't mean you should." The simple statement left her stunned. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not with respect, not with genuine concern. People usually looked at her with pity, or judgment, or indifference. But Alexander saw her. They walked side by side through the bustling market, drawing stares and whispers. Chima babbled happily from Amara's back, his small hands tugging at Alexander's sleeve whenever he came close. "He likes you," Amara said softly, unable to hide a smile. Alexander glanced at the child, a shadow crossing his eyes. "Children usually don't take to me, but this one feels different." Different. The word echoed in Amara's heart. That evening, after Alexander returned to his mansion, Victoria's curiosity boiled over. She had ordered one of the staff drivers to discreetly follow her husband's car earlier. When the man reported back that Alexander had been seen walking through a marketplace beside a young woman with a baby, Victoria's face hardened. "A baby!" she repeated, her wine glass shattering against the marble floor. Jealousy surged through her veins. Was this why Alexander had grown distant? Was this peasant girl the reason he avoided her touch? Her presence? Victoria's eyes narrowed, her mind already plotting. "No one steals my husband's attention," she hissed to herself. "No one." Back in the slum, Amara rocked Chima to sleep, humming softly as the baby's eyes fluttered shut. She had no idea that her quiet world was already caught in the storm of a wealthy woman's wrath. She only knew that, for the first time in her life, she felt seen. For the first time, hope whispered in her heart. And, for the first time, destiny had begun to test her courage. The wind swept through the narrow alleyways of the slum. As Amara balanced a basket of cassava on her head, Chima tied snugly to her back. Life, though still harsh, felt slightly lighter these days. Chima was growing stronger, his laugh filling the little room they called home. And though she would never admit it aloud, the unexpected reappearances of Alexander Okoro had sparked something deep within her, a strange comfort, a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. But kindness often invited envy. Across the city, in the Okoro mansion, Victoria paced furiously in her silk robe, her heels striking the marble floor like gunfire. She had replayed the driver's report in her mind 100 times. Her husband, walking side by side with a young woman, a baby on her back, people whispering, the humiliation of it made her blood boil. "This ends now," she muttered, dialing her private investigator. Within days, Victoria had Amara's entire life laid bare before her. Where she lived, where she worked, even the clinic where she had taken Chima. She sneered at the thin folder of information. "So this is the woman," Victoria said coldly, "a common street vendor." Her lips curled into a cruel smile. Let's see how she handles the weight of being noticed. The next week, Amara noticed strange things. At first, it was whispers in the market. Women who once chatted with her now exchanged knowing glances, their eyes sharp with judgment. A man muttered under his breath as she passed, "Think you're special because a rich man looked your way?" Amara frowned, clutching Chima closer. She didn't understand. She had never asked for Alexander's attention. She had never spoken of him to anyone. Yet somehow the market seemed to know. Then came the stall incident. She had set out her basket of dried fish, calling to customers when a group of women suddenly surrounded her. "Who do you think you are, Amara?" one sneered, "parading around like you're some queen because a man like Alexander Okoro spoke to you?" Another woman shoved the basket, spilling fish into the dirt. "Stay in your place." Amara gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the pieces, her cheeks burning with shame. "Please, I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. But the women only laughed cruelly before walking away. She carried Chima home that evening with tears streaming down her face. Her little boy patted her cheek, babbling softly, as if to comfort her. "We have each other," she murmured, pressing her forehead against his. "That's all that matters." Alexander, meanwhile, was unaware of the storm brewing. Business consumed his days, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the marketplace, to Amara's soft voice, to the baby's laughter. One evening, unable to resist, he drove himself through the crowded streets instead of sending a driver. He parked discreetly and spotted her stall from afar. She was busy arranging yams, her face weary but determined, the baby strapped securely to her back. Something in him softened. He admired her resilience, the way she carried herself with dignity despite her hardships. He stepped forward, but before he could call her name, a voice pierced the air. So it's true. Alexander turned sharply to see Victoria standing at the edge of the market, draped in designer silk, her diamond earrings glinting in the fading sunlight. She looked wildly out of place. Among the dirt and noise, her eyes burning with fury. Amara froze, her heart hammering in her chest. Who was this elegant woman? Why did she glare at her with such venom? Victoria, Alexander said, his voice low, warning. "Don't you dare say my name as if I'm the problem," she snapped. Pointing a trembling finger at Amara, she spat, "This is her? This is the woman you've been wasting your time on? This peasant with her bastard child?" The market fell silent. Every eye turned toward them. Amara felt the ground collapse beneath her. Her knees nearly buckled, but she clutched Chima, shielding him from the hateful words. Alexander's jaw clenched. "Enough, Victoria." "Enough?" She laughed bitterly. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? The great Alexander Okoro lowering himself to this? She gestured toward Amara as though she were filth. Tears burned Amara's eyes, but she forced her voice steady. "I don't know what you think, madam. I never—" "Silence!" Victoria cut her off. "You don't get to speak to me." Alexander stepped forward, his voice firm, cold. "You will not insult her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria's eyes widened in disbelief. "You dare defend her? Over me?" For the first time in her life, Amara witnessed power clashing at her doorstep, the fury of a scorned wife and the authority of a man who had always controlled every situation. She felt small, caught in a firestorm she never asked for. Victoria's voice dropped, venomous. "Mark my words, Amara. You will regret the day you ever cross paths with my husband." With that, she stormed back to her car, leaving silence in her wake. Amara stood trembling, tears sliding silently down her cheeks as the baby whimpered on her back. She looked at Alexander, who seemed torn, guilt etched across his face. "I'm sorry," he murmured, but the words felt hollow against the chaos he had brought into her life. Amara turned away, her heart breaking. "Please, sir, stay away from us. I cannot fight battles that are not mine." And with that, she walked into the shadows of the market, clutching Chima as though he were her only shield against the storm that had just begun. The days after Victoria's public outburst felt heavier than any burden Amara had carried before. The market women no longer spoke to her with kindness. Every whispered laugh, every side glance was like a knife to her chest. She walked with her head lowered, clutching Chima tightly, avoiding the stares that followed her like shadows. Her heart burned with humiliation. She had never wanted Alexander's attention. She had never sought it. Yet now, because of his presence in her life, she was branded, judged, and insulted. At night, as the rain tapped softly on the tin roof of her small room, Amara held Chima close and whispered to him, "We will stay away, my son, from him, from them. I cannot let their fire consume us." The baby cooed sleepily, his little hand resting against her cheek. It was a promise she made to herself. Distance was the only way to protect her child. Meanwhile, in his mansion, Alexander sat in silence, his drink untouched. Victoria's words still echoed in his mind, but louder than that was the image of Amara's tear-streaked face, her trembling voice as she begged him to stay away. He wanted to respect her wish, yet deep within, something refused to let go. Why did this woman, this child, matter so much? Why did Chima's laugh echo in his ears long after he left the marketplace? His assistant interrupted his thoughts one evening. "Sir, the foundation is due to host its annual outreach in the community clinic. Will you attend?" Alexander's eyes flickered. The clinic. That was where Amara often took Chima. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, his decision was made. "Yes, I'll attend." The clinic buzzed with activity the following week. Doctors in white coats moved briskly, volunteers arranged supplies, and children lined up for free medical checks. Amara had brought Chima, clutching his tiny hand as she guided him through the crowd. He was healthier now, his eyes bright, his smile toothy and full of life. Next, a nurse called, motioning for her to step forward. As Amara adjusted Chima on her hip, her heart nearly stopped. Across the clinic, surrounded by aides and photographers, stood Alexander. Tall, commanding, impeccably dressed, he was shaking hands with doctors, his smile polite but distant. Panic surged in her chest. She turned quickly, hoping to slip away unnoticed, but fate was relentless. Amara. His voice cut through the crowd, firm yet gentle. She froze. Slowly, reluctantly, she turned to meet his gaze. His eyes softened the moment they landed on her and Chima, as though the noise of the world faded away. "Sir," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, not here." But Chima, recognizing him, wriggled excitedly in her arms, reaching out both hands. "Dada!" the baby squealed. The word hit like lightning. The crowd gasped. Amara's knees buckled. She stared at her son in shock, her lips parting in disbelief. Chima had never spoken that word before. Alexander, equally stunned, stepped closer, his eyes locked on the child. For the first time in years, something inside him broke open. He reached out, and Chima leapt eagerly into his arms, giggling as though he had known him forever. Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "No, no, Chima," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's not your father." But the word lingered, echoing in the clinic like a secret revealed. Alexander held the child gently, his usually cold expression melting into something raw, vulnerable. "He feels like mine," he murmured, almost to himself. The crowd buzzed with whispers. Journalists scribbled notes, cameras flashed. The billionaire holding a poor woman's child, the baby calling him father, this was news that would spread like wildfire. Amara's panic grew. She rushed forward, snatching Chima back into her arms. "Please," she begged, tears streaking her cheeks. "Do not make this harder for me. I told you we cannot be near you. It destroys us." Her pain cut through him like a blade. He wanted to speak, to explain the storm raging inside him, but his aides tugged at his sleeve, urging him toward the waiting press. Before he could respond, Amara disappeared into the crowd, clutching Chima as though the world were chasing them. That night, Amara sat in the dark, rocking her baby. Her tears fell silently onto his soft curls. "Why would you call him that?" she whispered, her heart breaking. "Why would you give him more reason to look at us?" Chima only gurgled, pressing his tiny hand against her lips. Innocent, unknowing of the firestorm his little word had ignited. Amara knew things would never be the same. Alexander had heard it. The world had seen it. And even if she tried to run, fate was pulling them back into each other's orbit with invisible strings. In his mansion, Alexander sat alone, his mind spinning. The sound of the child's voice haunted him. "Da-da!" Why did it feel so right when it should have been impossible? And why, despite all the chaos, could he not shake the feeling that Amara and Chima were meant to be a part of his life in ways he had yet to understand? The story of the clinic spread like wildfire. By evening, it was on every blog, every social feed, every gossip corner of the city. Billionaire Alexander Okoro, seen holding baby at charity clinic, child calls him father. The photos were damning. Alexander's normally cold, distant expression was replaced by something shockingly tender. The child, Amara's child, was nestled against his chest, giggling with joy. The word "Dada" became the headline that fueled endless speculation. When Victoria saw the news on her tablet, her scream echoed through the Okoro mansion. "Enough!" she shouted, hurling the glass of wine in her hand against the wall, where it shattered into crimson shards. Her assistant froze in the doorway, trembling. "Ma'am, leave me," she barked. The assistant fled. Victoria stormed across the room, pacing like a caged lioness. Her nails dug into her palms as fury consumed her. "He humiliated me once, never again. That woman thinks she can shame me in public? That child dares to call my husband father?" Her voice dropped into a venomous whisper. She has no idea who she's dealing with. Meanwhile, in the slum, Amara sat in her tiny room, trembling as neighbors whispered outside. The walls seemed thinner than ever, the voices cutting deep. So it's true. The child belongs to Alexander. No wonder she acts so proud. She'll destroy her own life meddling with people like them. Amara clutched Chima, rocking him gently as tears filled her eyes. Hush, my son. Don't listen. They don't know. But inside, her heart was breaking. She had done everything to shield him from this world, and now fate had dragged them straight into its fire. That night, a knock rattled her door. She opened it cautiously, only to find a folded envelope lying on the step. No one was there. Her stomach tightened as she picked it up. Inside was a single piece of thick paper with bold, handwritten words, "Stay away from Alexander, or else." Amara's blood ran cold. The next morning, Alexander stormed into his boardroom, ignoring the startled looks of his executives. He had barely slept, the memory of Chima's little voice haunting him. His phone buzzed constantly, with reporters demanding answers, friends asking questions, and Victoria leaving message after message laced with venom. He silenced them all. His thoughts were fixed on one thing: Amara. By noon, he was at the marketplace again. But when he reached her stall, it was empty. The basket of yams, the wooden crate she usually sat on, gone. "Where is Amara?" he demanded of a nearby vendor. The woman glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. She left. Said she couldn't stay here anymore." Alexander's jaw tightened. He had caused this. His presence in her life had brought her trouble, humiliation, danger. Yet the idea of her vanishing filled him with panic. He wasn't ready to lose the fragile thread that bound them. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Victoria sat across from a man in a darkened restaurant booth. His suit was sharp, but his smile was sharper, his eyes cold with the kind of ruthlessness money couldn't buy. "I hear you want a problem taken care of," he said smoothly. Victoria leaned forward, her lips curving into a cruel smile. "Not taken care of. Watched. Controlled. I want that woman to suffer. I want her to regret ever crossing paths with my husband. And the child. Make sure he never dares to call Alexander father again." The man chuckled, swirling his drink. "Consider it done." Unaware of the storm about to fall on her, Amara walked along the riverside with Chima the next morning, seeking peace. She whispered softly to him, "We'll go far away, my son. Somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere no one can hurt us." But as the wind rustled through the reeds, a strange chill ran down her spine. She felt it eyes watching from the shadows. For the first time since she found Chima, fear gripped her heart, not because of poverty, not because of illness, but because of something darker, something human. Across the city, Alexander stood at his office window, staring out at the skyline. His phone buzzed with another message from Victoria, venomous and sharp. He ignored it. His mind replayed Chima's laughter, Amara's trembling voice, the pain in her eyes as she walked away from him. He clenched his fists. "I won't let her be destroyed because of me." For the first time in years, Alexander Okoro made a decision not for business, not for appearances, but for his heart. He would find Amara. He would protect her, no matter the cost. The slum was unusually quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that made Amara's skin crawl. She had just returned from the market with Chima tied securely on her back, a small bag of maize in her hands. Normally, children played in the streets, women gossiped at doorsteps, and vendors shouted prices until the sun dipped low. But tonight, the air felt heavy. She unlocked her small wooden door and froze. The room looked untouched, but something was wrong. A faint scent of cologne lingered, one she didn't recognize. Her chest tightened. She quickly shut the door, whispering to Chima, "Hush, my son. Mama's here." As she placed the maize on the table, her eyes landed on another envelope lying neatly on her mat. Hands trembling, she picked it up. Inside, in the same bold handwriting as before, were 5 words. "We are watching you. Run." Her knees buckled, she pressed Chima against her chest, rocking him back and forth. "God, please, don't let them harm us." 2 days later, the threat became real. Amara was returning from the clinic after Chima's checkup when she noticed 3 men trailing behind her. At first, she told herself it was coincidence, but when she quickened her steps, so did they. Her heart pounded. She turned into a narrow alley, clutching her baby tighter. "Where do you think you're going, pretty girl?" one of the men sneered. She spun around, eyes wide. They blocked the exit, their grins cruel. "Your rich friend won't be around to save you now," another said. "Madame Victoria sends her regards." Terror surged through Amara's veins. "Please," she begged, her voice shaking. "I've done nothing wrong. Leave us alone." The third man stepped closer, reaching for Chima. "That child doesn't belong in your arms." "No!" Amara screamed, twisting away, her arms tightening protectively around her son. Chima began to cry, his wails echoing through the alley. One of the men lunged forward, but before he could touch her, a voice like thunder roared from behind them. "Get your hands off her." The men froze. Amara's breath caught as Alexander stepped into the alley, his tall frame blocking the light, his eyes blazing with fury. "You heard me," he growled, fists clenched. "Touch her, and you'll wish you hadn't been born." The men exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected a frightened woman, not a billionaire with the power to ruin their lives. But greed and arrogance made them bold. One sneered. "This isn't your business, Okoro. Walk away." Alexander stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "She is my business." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Amara's heart skipped a beat. Before the men could react, Alexander's bodyguards appeared from both ends of the alley, armed and unyielding. Within seconds, the thugs were disarmed, pinned against the wall. Alexander turned to Amara, his expression softening instantly. "Are you hurt?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head, clutching Chima. "No, but they." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her baby's curls. Alexander stepped closer, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. "I'm here now. No one will hurt you again." Later that night, Amara sat in the back seat of Alexander's car, too shaken to protest, as he insisted on taking her and Chima somewhere safe. The city lights blurred past, but all she could hear was his voice replaying in her mind, "She is my business." Her heart warred with itself. She had begged him to stay away, to leave them in peace. Yet, when danger came, it was his arms, his world that shielded her. At last, the car pulled up to a gated estate, far from the chaos of the slum. The guard bowed as the gates swung open. Amara stared at the sprawling house before her, her breath catching. I cannot stay here," she whispered. "This is not my world." Alexander met her gaze, his expression steady. "It will be, if you let it." Her chest tightened. "People will talk. Your wife, my wife," Alexander interrupted bitterly, "has already declared war. And if she wants a war, she will have it. But you and the boy will not be her casualties." Tears welled in Amara's eyes. "Why are you doing this for us?" For a moment, Alexander was silent. Then his voice broke softly. "Because I can't stay away anymore. Every time I see him, every time I see you, it feels like I'm finally alive again." In Freeze said, Amara's breath hitched. She looked down at Chima, who had fallen asleep in her arms, his tiny face peaceful despite the storm raging around them. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if destiny had chosen this path long before she understood it. Across the city, Victoria slammed her wine glass onto the table, shattering it into pieces. News had already reached her that her men had failed. Worse, Alexander himself had stepped in. Her reflection glared back at her from the darkened window, eyes blazing with rage. "So he chooses her," she whispered. "So be it." Her lips curved into a cruel smile. "If he wants to protect her, I will make sure she has something worth losing." The battle lines were no longer hidden. War had begun. The mansion was quiet, but Amara could not sleep. She sat by the large window in the guest room, the moonlight spilling across her face. Chima slept peacefully in the crib. Alexander had insisted be brought in, but Amara's mind churned restlessly. This house was nothing like the one-room shack she had called home. The air smelled of roses instead of sewage, the silence was calm instead of threatening, and the sheets beneath her were soft enough to sink into. Yet, despite the luxury, her heart ached. She whispered into the night, "What am I doing here? God, is this truly your plan, or am I being led into destruction?" Her thoughts were broken by a soft knock at the door. "Amara?" Alexander's voice drifted through, gentle yet firm. She hesitated before opening the door. He stood there in a simple shirt and trousers, his usual aura of authority dimmed by the tired lines on his face. "I couldn't sleep either," he admitted. Amara lowered her gaze, clutching her wrapper tightly. "You shouldn't be here. People will talk." He chuckled softly. "People already talk, and they'll keep talking until their tongues fall out. but I don't care anymore." Her head snapped up at his words. "You don't care? Alexander, you are a man with a family, with a name. I'm nothing but a poor woman who found a child in the trash. What will they say about you when they know you've brought me here?" His eyes darkened with conviction. "Let them say what they want. For years, I've lived under the weight of other people's expectations, my family's, my board's, even Victoria's. But for once, I'm choosing what I want." Amara's breath caught. "And what is it you want?" Alexander stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You and him," he gestured toward the sleeping child. "The two of you are the only things that make sense to me anymore." Tears burned Amara's eyes. She shook her head, backing away slightly. "Don't say such things. Your wife—" "My wife has already made her choice," Alexander cut in sharply. "She chose greed, control, and destruction. I choose love, even if it destroys me." Amara turned away, covering her face with her hands. "You don't know what you're saying. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you." Alexander reached for her hands, gently lowering them. "Don't you see? You saved me, Amara, long before you realized it. You saved me with your strength, your kindness, your courage to raise that boy when the world would have cast him aside. And I won't let you go." Dariel's. Her chest heaved, her heart waging war with itself. She had sworn never to let feelings cloud her judgment, but now, standing before this man, she felt her walls crumble. For the briefest moment, silence filled the space between them. Then, from the hallway, a sharp sound shattered it, the clinking of glass. Both turned toward the door. Standing there, her eyes gleaming with venom, was Victoria. Her arrival was like a dagger to the chest. She stepped inside slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Well," she said with a cold laugh, "isn't this cozy? My husband and his little charity project, playing house while I'm left outside in the cold." Amara froze, her hands instinctively clutching her wrapper tighter. Alexander immediately stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. "Victoria, enough," Alexander said, his voice like steel. "Leave." "Leave?" Victoria repeated mockingly. "This is my house. You bring this slum girl into my home, and you dare to tell me to leave?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "This is no longer your home, not after what you tried to do to her. I warned you, Victoria. You crossed the line." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You would throw away everything we built for this girl? For a bastard child that isn't even yours?" Amara flinched at the cruelty, but Alexander didn't waver. He stepped closer to his wife, his voice low and deadly. "That child is mine in every way that matters, and Amara is more of a wife than you have ever been." Victoria's face twisted with rage, but Alexander didn't stop. "You think money and power give you control, but you've already lost, Victoria. Because while you plotted and schemed, Amara gave me something you never could: peace." Amara's heart pounded in her chest, tears streaming down her face. She had never imagined a man of his stature would speak such words on her behalf, let alone against his own wife. Victoria's hand trembled with fury. "You'll regret this, Alexander. I swear I'll make you both regret it." She turned sharply and stormed out, her threats echoing in the halls. The silence that followed was suffocating. Amara collapsed onto the chair, clutching her chest. "You shouldn't have said those things," she whispered. "You've made her hate me even more." Alexander knelt before her, lifting her chin gently. "Let her hate you. Let the whole world hate you. It changes nothing about what I feel." Amara's lips trembled. "And what if she tries again? What if she takes Chima away?" Alexander's eyes blazed. "She won't. Not as long as I'm alive." For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. The storm raging outside mirrored in their hearts. And somewhere deep inside, Amara realized no matter how much she fought it, destiny had already bound them together. Meanwhile, Victoria sat in her car, gripping her phone tightly. Her voice was venomous as she spoke to the person on the other end. "If Alexander wants war, he'll have it. I want everything on that woman, her past, her family, her weaknesses. Find me something I can use to destroy her completely." Her eyes narrowed. "If he loves her, then I'll make sure he watches her burn." The war was no longer just about pride. It was about annihilation. The storm outside had raged all night, thunder rolling like drums of war. Amara sat awake in the mansion's library, Chima nestled against her chest. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Ever since Victoria's threats, she lived with the constant dread that danger could strike at any moment. Alexander had tightened security around the estate, doubling his guards. But Amara knew Victoria was not the kind of woman who gave up easily. As dawn broke, the mansion stirred. Alexander entered the library, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his face weary yet resolute. "You didn't sleep," he said gently. Amara shook her head. "How could I? She's not finished." He placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Neither am I." His voice was iron. "I've started divorce proceedings, Amara. By law and by heart, Victoria's hold over me will end." Her eyes widened. "Divorce? But the scandal, your company?" "I've built empires," Alexander interrupted. "I can rebuild them again, but I won't rebuild a heart once it's lost. And mine belongs here." Amara's breath caught. She wanted to protest, to remind him of the gulf between their worlds. But the words died when she saw the truth in his eyes. He meant it. Every word. Later that day, the war exploded. It started with a phone call. One of the guards rushed in, panic on his face. "Sir, madam, there's been a breach. The East Gate armed men forced their way in." Before Amara could react, the sound of shattering glass erupted. Figures in black stormed the mansion, weapons gleaming. "Get down!" Alexander roared, pulling Amara and Chima behind him. His guards clashed with the intruders, the air thick with shouts, fists, and gunfire. Amara crouched low, shielding Chima with her body, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst. She prayed desperately, whispering, "Lord, protect us, please." Then, through the chaos, a familiar voice rang out like poison. "Amara!" She looked up, and there was Victoria, standing in the doorway, dressed in black, her eyes blazing with triumph. "You thought you could steal my life?" Victoria spat. "You thought you could take my husband, my wealth, my dignity? I'll destroy you before I let that happen." Amara's lips trembled. "Please, Victoria, don't do this. It doesn't have to end this way." Victoria's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Oh, it ends today. For you." She raised a gun. Time slowed. Amara froze, clutching Chima tighter. The baby whimpered, sensing the danger. Her eyes squeezed shut until suddenly a body moved in front of hers. Alexander. "Victoria," his voice thundered. "If you want blood, then take mine, but you will never touch them." Victoria's hand shook with rage. "You would die for her?" "I would live for her," Alexander said firmly. "That is the difference between you and me." For a heartbeat, silence. Then, bang! The gun fired. Amara screamed. But when she opened her eyes, Alexander still stood before her, untouched. One of his bodyguards had lunged at the last second, knocking Victoria's arm upward. The bullet buried itself in the chandelier, shattering glass across the floor. Guards swarmed, disarming Victoria, pinning her to the ground as she thrashed and cursed. "You'll regret this!" she shrieked. "Both of you! He will leave you! He always does!" Amara shook as Alexander turned back to her, kneeling at her side. "Are you hurt?" She could barely speak. "No, but Alexander." He cupped her face, his eyes fierce yet tender. "It's over. She can't touch you anymore." By nightfall, Victoria was in police custody. The evidence of her crimes, hired thugs, attempted assault, attempted murder was overwhelming. The world that once bowed to her name now spat it out with disgust. Alexander stood before the media days later, Amara at his side, Chima in her arms. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. Alexander raised his hand for silence. "This is the woman I love," he declared. "And this is the child I will raise as my own. No scandal, no threat, no lie will change that. Judge me if you must, but I choose them." The crowd erupted, some in shock, others in admiration. For the first time, Amara felt no shame. She held her head high, knowing she had nothing to hide. Weeks passed. Peace slowly returned. One evening, Amara stood on the balcony of the mansion, Chima toddling at her feet. The sky was painted in shades of orange and gold. Alexander came up behind her, wrapping an arm gently around her waist. "He's growing fast," he said, watching Chima laugh as he chased a butterfly. Amara smiled softly. Yes, he is strong. Stronger than I ever imagined. And so are you, Alexander said, kissing her temple. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. I was afraid, Alexander. Afraid of this love, afraid of losing myself. But now I see. It was never about losing. It was about finding family, finding home. He turned her gently to face him. And have you found it? Amara looked into his eyes, her heart steady at last. Yes, with you, with him. Chima stumbled toward them, his little arms raised. Amara scooped him up, and Alexander placed his hand over theirs. The three of them stood together, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Despite the trials, the betrayals, the threats, love had won, and in that moment, Amara knew. The child she had once found abandoned in the trash had not just given her a son, he had given her a destiny.